Scarborough Zoning Board of Appeals. Would you please stand and join me for the I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, may we have the roll call, Doreen?
James Hebert.
Present.
David Bork. Peter Freilinger.
Here.
Christine Snow.
Here.
Rudy Karen.
Here.
And Richard Silkman.
Great, thank you, Doreen. All right, let's first take a look at the minutes from our July 13th, 2022 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review and take a look through the minutes? Does anyone have any comments or edits or corrections? Yes, Mr. Freilinger.
I had a question on the interrupted practical difficulty variance. I think the minutes are fine. They're all great.
Yep.
Do we go back over this and would therefore the minutes be updated based on our new discussion, or how does that work for the minutes?
So good question. I'll explain it now. What we'll do is we're just going to approve the minutes because that was that meeting's minutes. So we can go up and down and approve these as they are now. As far as addressing the last bit of the last application, we'll jump right in with it as our first order of business. We only have criteria number 8 to discuss and vote on, and then an up and down vote on the entire application. That's how we'll sort of proceed with that tonight.
Got it, thanks. And on that, I'd move to approve the minutes.
Cool. Is there a second? Mr. Bork, any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, Ms. Snow?
Aye.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Karen?
Aye.
Mr. Silkman?
I'll abstain.
Great, thank you. And I'll vote aye as well. And also for the record, Mr. Silkman is our only non-voting member tonight. Everybody else is voting. All right. So we will go through the only draft written decision we had last month, appeal number 2729, the practical difficulty by Mary McKee for 14 Pinewood Circle, not 16. Has everyone had a chance to look through the findings and the notes? And does anyone have any questions on that one? Before we go up and down. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve those findings as presented. Mr. Bork?
So moved.
Great. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Freilinger seconds. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, Ms. Snow?
Aye.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Karen?
Aye.
Mr. Silkman?
I'll abstain.
Thank you very much. And I will vote an aye for this as well. So those are approved and those may be processed and signed through the town. So what we're going to do now is we have 3 appeals that we have this evening, 2730, 2732, and 2733, where we're going to start with appeal number 2730, as that was interrupted by technical difficulty last month during our July meeting. So right now we are in, if everybody can take a look at their packets, we're in criteria number 8. We have gone through and up and down voted on all 1 through 7 of the criteria. And so this last bit of portion here is please demonstrate how the strict application of the dimensional standards of the ordinance to the property for which a variance is sought would both preclude a use of the property that is permitted in the zone which is located and would also result in significant economic injury to the applicant. So I will start here and just sort of throw my comments out just to kind of get everybody's mind back into this discussion on this one. We went through and the vote has been in support of each of the criteria thus far. And looking at this strict application of the dimensional standards of the ordinance to this property would result in a building envelope of 12.9 feet wide, which really wouldn't provide any kind of space for any sort of growing young family to reside in a building of that size if they were to have a strict interpretation of the variance in that space. As far as economic injury, the actual buildable envelope in there, the customization of the home would really preclude it from a really proper use. I'll start with you, Mr. Karen, for any additional comments you'd like to add onto this one.
Thank you. No further comments.
Okay. Mr. Silkman, do you have any comments that you'd like to add for this, or would you? be fine
No,
with
I'll
abstaining on this
abstain
one?
as well on
Great,
this one.
perfect, thank you. I just wanted to check in. Mr. Bork?
No further comments.
Okay. Mr. Freilinger?
The only comment I'll add is a comment that I had from the last one, which is I think these statements have been asserted, but they haven't been demonstrated. And I'd like us to be a little bit more upfront about asking applicants or appellants to demonstrate or provide some background information to really demonstrate that this hasn't been met. So with that comment, though, I'll hold off.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Snow, would you like to add anything?
Nothing further.
Great. I will note that there have been, with regard to this property and what they want to do here, putting in a home that is the size of other homes in that area without really changing the characteristic or aesthetic appearance of other buildings or dwellings in that neighborhood. And this is what they're looking to go for. So I see no problem with voting in favor of this one. So we're going to go up and down vote on this one. Mr. Silkman, I'll presume you're abstaining on this. Thank you. Mr. Karen,
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Frolinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I will vote aye as well. So that passes there. And now I'll entertain a motion to approve appeal number 2730, the practical difficulty apparent variance appeal for 16 Pinewood Circle. Mr. Bork,
So moved.
and do I have a second?
Second?
Mr. Frolinger, all those in favor, Mr. Karen,
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Frolinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
Mr. Silkman, do you abstain?
Yes, I'll abstain as well.
Thank you, and I will vote aye as well, and the appeal passes. So that is officially all set. Appeal number 2730 is complete, and yes.
And let's never discuss this again.
So thank you very much for your time and your patience, Sonia. Thank you for coming back here. Really appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Yes. Mr.
just
Longstaff.
to remind you, we started a policy last time of not polling the non-voting members for a vote because it confused the tally on the final votes.
That's right.
So if you
yes,
could
thank
continue
you.
to do that, that would help us greatly in not making
Understood.
mistakes on the
Understood.
tally.
So if that's all right.
No offense, Mr. Silkman.
Perfect. Excellent.
you.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's move on to our second appeal tonight, appeal number 2732. This is a special exception home occupation by Melissa L. Dennis of 146 Holmes Road. So before we start this application, I wanted to make a disclosure to the board. As it turns out, I live directly across the street from this applicant. I feel, hi. So we haven't actually met or interacted or spoken about this at all. I do feel that I am clear-minded and not biased in any means to be able to carry on and conduct the meeting, but I want to express that disclosure to everyone. And if someone has any kind of issue, I will get up and leave the room, and Rudy will take over the chair. Mr. Silkman will be a voting member. Does anybody have an issue with me? Great. Okay, then we will continue and carry forward as we are. So, Ms. Dennis, if you wouldn't mind, if you would please come up to the podium. Tell us generally about the project, what you're doing here, and what we'll do is we'll walk through each of the questions that you provided us on the application, and you'll read your answers in, and we may have some questions and back and forth for you.
Okay. What I'm trying to do with the project is I have had my home processing license since 2017 through the state of Maine, which means that I have to move out of my own kitchen to be able to create my products. And that has gotten to the point where it's very difficult with a 12-year-old at home. Reality. So what I would like to do is build a separate building that puts my kitchen separate from my house. It's a small footprint, but it allows me to actually function in my own household and run my business at the same time.
Okay. So what you're doing is, what kind of products are you making here? Just to give some of the board some background of like what of the current existing conditions that you have there, what you're looking to create, sell.
I do a whole line of pepper jellies, jams, and I do spice mixes and barbecue rubs.
Cool. And as we go through, I'll start with just going through the criteria now. And if anybody's any questions, we'll save those towards the end after we go through each one of those. Letter A, the proposed use will not create unsanitary or unhealthful conditions by reason of sewage disposal, emissions to the air or water, or other aspects of its design or operation. And what you can do is you can read your answers that you provided us right into here. Do you have a copy of the
I
application? in front of
didn't
you?
bring a copy,
Oh,
but I
okay.
can get one on my phone, but, I know what I wrote. So, there will be, the actual building will be tied into the sewer. There will be no toilet facilities, so therefore not adding additional facilities, within the sewer system. There is a venting system to remove the heat and fumes, that will balance out, any additional potential contaminants that can be in the environment.
Great. So there will not be a bathroom in this building?
No bathroom.
Will there be a sink?
There'll be 2 sinks because you have
Two
to have a
sinks.
hand washing sink and then you have to have your main washing sink.
Sure. And that's going to be tied right into your existing septic system that you have there at your home?
Yes.
Great. And that, and Mr. Longstaff, that design would have to be run through your department first to make sure that that design is copacetic.
That's correct. We'd have to determine that it wasn't a 25% increase in the existing flow.
Great.
And a site evaluator can provide an updated HHE 200 for that. So
Great. So just for information on the board for lines of questioning regarding this, the town does have to go through and approve from a standpoint of whether or not this feasibly fits there and functions with their current system. Letter B, the proposed use will not create unsafe vehicular or pedestrian traffic conditions when added to existing and foreseeable traffic in its vicinity.
So because I have a U-shaped driveway, it's very helpful, that people don't have to back in or back out of the property. They can drive straight through. My level of people showing up is no different than having regular visitors to my property. Amazon shows up a lot. I get jars once in a while. It's not a high volume, large trucking type. So, and everybody has the opportunity to not back into or out of Holmes Road because we know that's not safe.
Sure, of course. Great. So you're anticipating that deliveries to here are just going to be UPS, FedEx, or Amazon or things like that?
Yeah, if I have a large delivery, I have it sent to a friend's business and they put it on the fork truck and then we put it on the truck and unload it that way.
Cool.
So,
Okay, thank you. Letter C, the proposed use will not create public safety problems, which would be substantially different from those created by existing uses in the neighborhood or require a substantially greater degree in a municipal fire or police protection than existing uses in the neighborhood.
I don't expect there to be any. I'm in a kitchen cooking, so kind
Sure.
of by myself
Yeah,
in
you
this one.
You don't anticipate any additional fire or police necessity just because of that. Great.
Yeah.
Letter D, the proposed use will not result in sedimentation or erosion or have an adverse effect on water supplies.
No, not at all. The whole property is a little bit odd in its setup. We've had some issues with water over the years. It'll continue the same path where it'll be drained off correctly. It's no different than, it's a pretty small footprint based on the 4.25 acres that are on that property. So,
Okay, thank you. The proposed use will be compatible with existing uses in the neighborhood with respect to physical size, visual impact, intensity of use, proximity to other structures, and density of development.
Holmes Road is quite the mix of home occupations, other businesses down throughout the whole strip of it. I don't find that there's anything that's significantly different than anything in the neighborhood. It's just because I'm cooking, which is a little bit different, but really there's multiple businesses within arm's throw.
Right. You'd say, there's probably a lot of folks out there on Holmes Road that grow vegetables and probably sell them on little farm stands and things like that.
Yes, and around the corner on Beach Ridge Road, and so it's kind of normal for that area.
Sure. And that's a rural farm.
Yes.
Is that correct? Thank you. Letter F, Mr. Longstaff, is this located in a shoreland zone?
I can verify that it is not in a shoreland zone, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so we don't need to answer that question. That was handled by the town. Letter G, the applicant has sufficient right, title, or interest in the site of the proposed use to be able to carry out the proposed use. So do you own the property? Are you deeded to it? Is it all in
Yes.
your name?
It is all in my name.
Great. Letter H, the applicant has the technical and financial ability to meet the standards of this section to comply with any conditions imposed by the Board of Appeals pursuant to subsection 5 of this section. So you have the technical and financial ability to execute this business and also implement any restrictions that if we were to have any on you, you'd be able to handle those.
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you. Letter I, the proposed use will be compatible with existing uses in the neighborhood with respect to the generation of noise and hours of operation. So tell us a little more about that.
It's not a really loud neighborhood, and the way the wind blows, it's not really, you don't hear a lot. I mean, like Beach Ridge ran for years and you didn't really, it was just a buzzing in the background.
Sure.
There's no way I'm going to hit any sound issue working inside my kitchen. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So,
Fair.
no.
Awesome, thank you very much. All right, and that was letter I. Do I have any questions from board members at this time? Mr. Bork?
A couple of quick questions about the facility. Will you be cooking with electric or gas?
Gas.
So your hood system has some kind of fire suppression system built in?
The hood system does not require fire suppression under the code. So what it needs to do is exhaust the heat and exhaust the fumes. But at this point, I don't need fire suppression.
Okay.
Great.
And so you're licensed by the Department of Agriculture?
Yes.
Okay.
My kitchen is, I will have to go through the same process again with the new kitchen.
Okay. I noticed some of the prep tables are plastic, not stainless steel. Is that something that isn't an
That would be
error?
my architect's issue. Mine are
Okay.
all
All right.
stainless.
No problem. So they'll be looking at all that stuff. That's all I
Yes.
had. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Freilinger?
I guess I had a question. It might be for the code enforcement officer. So you're currently using your kitchen for this, and that has already been subject to a special use exemption, or that's already allowed under the code?
So I didn't realize that I needed a special exception to be able to do that. I received my license from the state
Yep.
for my kitchen and have continued on, and it only came about when we started discussing whether putting that building in.
Gotcha.
So I'm working retroactive.
No, it's great, and we appreciate that. And there are some zoning exceptions that note whether the process has already been, things are already occurring, in other words. But this special use exemption doesn't have that question. So I'm just asking the code enforcement, is there anything we need to consider? Just,
No, this is really just a nice way to correct a situation that was, to Melissa's credit, I'm sure she was shocked when I said, ooh, this is a special exception home occupation. I'm sure probably if we knew the amount of people that are doing
you're right.
this type of thing, small scale, small batch processing,
Mhm.
didn't realize they needed anything. It happens. It's probably happened 4 or 5 times in my career here. So I know it happens, and this is an opportunity to correct that and get her into compliance, get her into the food handler's license locally as well as, and we're not trying to stand in the way of small ag and stuff. We definitely
No,
want to be ag friendly and allow
Especially in the
this to
RF
happen.
zone and all the rest. Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. It's just
It's just a
wanted to-
way to dot the i's and cross the t's.
wanted to know if we had any
Yep.
special things we had to consider, but
No.
It
that's great. Thank
shouldn't
you.
really be a consideration by the board. You should be reviewing what's in front of you and not what's occurred in the.
Terrific.
past.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very
'cause-
much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
because
that.
we don't have that quite, it's not like the other applications where we have the question of have they commenced construction already, this is something a little bit different. So what we're going to do, first off, are there any other comments from the board? Any questions?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Just
Karen.
some general ones, just to confirm. It mentions water's coming in with the sewer, but there's an existing septic tank. I'm just looking at the photo.
Yes.
Okay. And everything that's being produced currently in the kitchen, proposed for the new structure, is safe for such a system.
Yes.
Okay. Any information about the hours of operation? I know that you mentioned noise wouldn't be a concern.
I do a lot of work on weekends because I have a full-time job as well. So evenings and weekends. I'm not a late night owl anyways, so I'm more likely to work at like 5 a.m. than I am at 10 o'clock at night. So
Okay, that's fine. And I'm just asking questions for the record.
Cool.
Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
welcome.
Have Mr. Longstaff or Doreen, have we received any emails, phone calls, written letters about this? Excellent, great. So what we're going to do is,
Did I answer the question?
I was looking at, sorry, I was looking at Reddit, Doreen.
You asked me, don't look
I
at
said,
her.
I said Brian and Doreen. I just need one person to answer, please. But thank you.
She might not know what I've.
Doreen knows all. So what we will do is, before we continue with our discussion of these criteria, we'd like to go through the performance standards for the home occupation. And thank you very much, Melissa, for providing this all filled out. Not all of our applicants tend to fill these out and send them to us. We have to sort of hunt through and ask the questions again. So thank you very much for this. So what will we do here for board members? This is the Section 5 performance standards or home occupations. We're going to read through each of these criteria, similar to what we've been doing thus far. Melissa's going to answer these questions for us. If there isn't a significant disagreement or critical discussion of any of the criteria here, we will vote on these once at the very end, just sort of as a slate up and down for the entire thing, unless we have some start to having serious discussion, and it would be more prudent to vote on these one by one. So for number one of the home occupation standards, the occupation or profession shall be carried on wholly within the principal building or within a building accessory thereto. So it'll all be inside of this one structure.
Yes, with the exception of a small amount of potential retail space that's under 120 square feet, that's in the front of the house.
Sure. When that, and that is provided by, as far as the ordinance, you are allowed to have that. Number two, the home occupation shall be clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling unit for residential purposes.
Definitely my primary residence. So.
Yep, you live there with your family, and that is your
I do.
your primary residence there. 3, no more than one person who is not a resident of the dwelling unit shall be employed in the home occupation.
At this point, I have no employees. So, but I understand the criteria and
Yep.
can keep with that. So,
You can have one.
Yeah.
And if it grows to that point, and we always wish our small businesses great success. Number 4, exterior signage shall be permitted in accordance with the home occupation sign provisions under Section 12, sign regulations, subsection E. So essentially, you would talk to Brian, and you are able to have a sign if you wish.
there's already one there. So we may
Yep.
have to make some adjustments to that. But,
Perfect. But
Understood.
you're working with Brian on that.
Yep.
Is that correct?
well, we're in process.
Great. Thank you very much. 5, there shall be no exterior display, no exterior storage of materials, and no other exterior indication of the home occupation or variation from the residential character of the principal building, except as expressly permitted by the district regulations of this ordinance. And this prohibition shall not apply to the storage of lobster traps. So you're not going to be, are you planning to store any of your base building or cooking materials outside?
No, that would not meet any code whatsoever.
Great.
So
That's the answer we want to hear.
staying inside.
Thank you. 6, no nuisance shall be generated, including but not necessarily limited to offensive noise, vibration, smoke, dust, offensive odors, heat, or glare.
There will be none.
Great. Number 7, the traffic generated by such home occupation shall not increase the volume of traffic so as to create a traffic hazard or disturb the residential character of the immediate neighborhood.
You live on Holmes Road. There's no way to make that any worse than it already is.
Sure, sure.
There's no way.
Yep. But I guess I'll quote you from earlier. You had mentioned that, the only vehicles that you anticipate coming in, UPS, FedEx, and that's pretty standard and typical to other residences in the area.
Yeah, and once a month, I have a customer pickup, and it's just like having a friend come over. So it's not any increase in volume at all.
Great, thank you. 8, In addition to the off-street parking provided to meet the normal requirements of the dwelling, adequate off-street parking shall be provided for the vehicles of each employee and the vehicles of the maximum number of users or customers the home occupation may attract during peak operating hours.
There's plenty of parking
Great.
available.
And
for-
you had mentioned too, there is a loop in your drive where you're able to drive in and drive out without having to back onto Holmes Road.
Correct.
Great. Number 9, the home occupation may utilize no more than 20% of the dwelling unit floor area, provided that for the purposes of this calculation, unfinished basement and attic spaces are not included. B, unfinished attic and basement spaces, space within an accessory building totaling not more than 1,000 square feet of floor area. And you had indicated here the building is 448 square feet. Number 10, home occupations may include retail sales subject to the following limitations. The total area devoted to retail sales is limited to 400 square feet and must be fully enclosed within the building. Is that, Des, that is your intent?
Yes.
Great. The sale of products is limited to products and articles produced, assembled, or processed on the premises, and seafood caught or harvested off premises by persons who reside in the dwelling unit or by the one employee permitted under paragraph 3 above. So you're, I guess, forget a lot of these questions they have involved in here, like seafood and lobster traps and so
Yeah.
on, but that's clearly does not apply. But just generally describe 10 to you state here that 10 to 12 times a year customers do come on site to pick up products.
Yeah. Especially during COVID, that was one of the, when there were no shows happening, but they can order online and they set a time and come and pick it up at my convenience. So it's not a high volume thing. A lot of it is sold throughout wholesale accounts and private show and other shows. So
Great, thank you. Number 11, this pertains to fishermen, lobstermen, shellfish harvesters. Well, that is not applicable to this application. Number 12 is a motor vehicle home repair, which is also not applicable to this application. That's not what the applicant is seeking. Does the board members have any questions on this? I'll start with you, Mr. Bork.
Yes, I have a question regarding the retail sales area.
Mhm.
You are intending to put this inside of your home, not in the accessory building, is that correct?
I currently have a space in the front left-hand side of the house. That's very small, but I have one, a cabinet for each type of product. And I would prefer to leave that right there. And then all my storage comes out, everything else comes out into the building.
Okay. No, the reason I ask that is it isn't really clear to me whether or not what this says, criterion 10, whether it says that your retail has to be within the building that you're producing or not, or in the residence, if it's in an accessory unit, which you're doing. And I guess I just need a clarification from Brian as to this point.
And if I can maybe preempt this before you answer, Brian, is it that the wording of the question, it must be fully enclosed within a building, does not specify which building?
I don't think it does, excuse me, I don't think it does specify which building. And I look at it this way, the combined retail space and the space of our accessory exterior or outbuilding doesn't even come close to hitting the 1,000 square foot mark. So I don't really see a problem with her having a very small space inside her home to do the retail. And it isn't specific in the ordinance.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just need a clarification on that point, because to me, it was not clearly defined. And we've had other cases come up similar to this, where it was separate. The cooking was going on in one building, sales was going on in another building, and we turned an application down for that reason, if I'm not mistaken. Partially for that reason, there were other factors.
Yeah, there are other factors there.
One thing I'll say is, as I read the regulation, I had the same question, Mr. Bork. It struck me that the regulation was designed to prevent the proliferation of roadside benches and stands in the RF district, which can happen in some areas of Maine. And I think that the town wanted to avoid that kind of informal outdoor sales practices. So as I read the A building, it was designed to make sure that it was inside a structure as opposed to just kind of on the driveway or on the road front.
Good point, thank you. Any other comments, questions from the board? Okay, what I'll do now is we'll have an up and down vote on this. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the performance standards and answers that have been read into the record. Mr. Bork,
So moved.
is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Karen, we'll go up and we'll have an up down vote for either one. So all those in favor of the performance standards being met, Mr. Karen,
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So now we're going to transition back. So these are all, we're all set with the home occupations for now. And I believe we're all set with you for right now as well, Melissa. Thank you very much. So now what we're going to do is transition into the public hearing. I know we had mentioned if we had had any emails or phone calls or anything like that. We have not. Is there anybody here in the audience that would like to speak with regarding to this application? Did everybody jump at once? Great. Excellent. So seeing that, the public hearing is closed for this application. And now we're going to deliberate amongst the board ourselves and go through each of the criteria. So going through letter A, the proposed use will not create unsanitary or unhealthful conditions by reason of sewage disposal, emissions to the air or water, or other aspects of its design or operation. Mr. Karen.
As we've heard this evening, there's the intent to provide a new sewer line. The items that would be assembled and prepared are safe for such systems. The venting is going to, does not need the fire protection, but will simply vent outside to the exterior of the residence. So
Excellent. And Mr. Silkman, do you have anything you'd like to add? I still would like to get your input on all of the comments that we're going to go through here.
No, nothing to add on this one.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bork, excuse me.
Nothing to add.
Mr. Freilinger,
Nothing to add.
Ms. Snow?
Same here.
Okay. One item that was clarified, and thank you for asking the question. I can't remember if that was Mr. Bork or Mr. Freilinger, but fire suppression, especially with gas stoves, is a lot of times a delicate scenario that we're dealing with residential homes and dwellings now. But because of its size, it does not always have to have a fire suppression. That's more for like large scale, like large commercial ranges and so on, and not more of the smaller residential. So having just an exhaust evacuation is sufficient here.
And it's usually associated with grease-laden vapors. And
Yeah.
this is more steam, I believe. Right. Steam and heat.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Longstaff. So that being said, all those in favor of criteria A being met, Mr. Karen,
aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I will vote aye as well. Letter B, the proposed use will not create unsafe vehicular or pedestrian traffic conditions when added to existing and foreseeable traffic in its vicinity. I'll start again with you, Mr. Karen.
I was shared this evening that the road is already busy, that any additional vehicular traffic to this space, like a typical visitor, would not be out of place or noticed. As mentioned, there's the benefit of having the U-turn so that people do not have to back out onto the road, simply pull out forward. And there wasn't any mention of any pedestrian traffic, so no concern.
Great. Mr. Silkman?
Nothing to add to those comments.
Great. Ms. Snow?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Mr. Freilinger?
Nothing to add.
Mr. Bork?
Yeah, I would also say that the applicant does most sales online and fulfillment off-site. So it's just a very small percentage of the customers that she has that are actually visiting the site.
Mhm.
So this is not going to be a significant impact on traffic at all.
Great. I'll also add to that, one of the considerations that I always try to take into account, especially when dealing with home occupations, is the ability for vehicles to navigate in and out of the said site safely and not backing out onto Holmes Road. And it's been stated and documented in the application by the applicant that they have 2 driveway entrances and they have a well-indicated loop for folks to pull in and pull out safely. So that being said, we'll vote on criteria letter B. Mr. Karen,
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I will vote aye as well. Letter C, the proposed use will not create public safety problems, which would be substantially different from those created by existing uses in the neighborhood or require a substantially greater degree in municipal fire police protection than existing uses in the neighborhood. And I'm going to start down here with Ms. Snow.
There's no additional public safety issues.
Excellent. Mr. Freilinger,
Wholly agree.
Mr. Bork?
I think that it's important to note, as we've already said, that this is not a large commercial operation which would require, even though it's gas cooking, does not require a fire suppression system. So, this does not require any additional fire or police, for that matter.
Thank you. Mr. Karen?
Agreed. It was stated that unfortunately, some of the similar activities have already been occurring within the home, so the proposed use is typical what could occur within a residence. So nothing major, as Mr. Bork said, nothing that's overly commercial, large scale. So that would necessitate any additional police or fire protection.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Silkman?
Nothing to add to the comments.
Great. And I think you touched upon the key point here, Mr. Karen, always with regard to this question, is typical within a residence already. So we're not looking at any sort of different processing that's going on here that would necessitate a more intensive response from public safety or fire. That being said, Mr. Karen, we'll go with our up and down vote.
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I will vote aye as well. Letter D, the proposed use will not result in sedimentation or erosion or have an adverse effect on water supplies. I'll start with you again, Ms. Snow.
She did mention that there is some water issues sometimes on the property, but she's using a lot of gravel to try and displace the water, and it's a very small footprint on a large property, and there shouldn't be erosion problems.
Very good. Mr. Freilinger.
Agreed. No further comment.
All right, very good. Mr. Bork.
Agreed.
Excellent. Mr. Karen.
Similar to what Ms. Snow mentioned, there is known paths of water travel on the site with the intent of mimicking those to offset any erosion issues.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Mr. Silkman.
No further comments.
Great. Again, this is a proposed use that's typical on a residence anyways, already in the space, whether if you had like a sink or something in your garage, if we're working, that's not untypical for a residence in this area. And it is such a small footprint on the 4¼ acres that they have that any kind of impact would be very, very minimal, if at all. So that being said, Mr. Karen, how do you vote on letter D?
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Letter E, the proposed use will be compatible with existing uses in the neighborhood with respect to physical size, visual impact, intensity of use, proximity to other structures, and density of development. I'll go back to you, Mr. Karen.
The appellant has provided some sketches of visible elevation and plans that represent that this should not be an overly large structure that can be easily hidden by the existing structures between it and the road. So there would not be a detrimental visual impact. Intensity of use sounds as if there's only going to be one occupant at a time preparing the goods. Proximity to structures behind those already existing, and the use itself, once again, is similar to those that are in the neighborhood within existing residences.
Very good. Mr. Silkman?
Nothing further to add.
Great. Mr. Bork?
The property is a rather large piece of property located in the rural farm district where there are many other types of uses. And this particular proposed use would have minimal impact compared to other things that are already happening in that area.
Great. Mr. Excuse me, Mr. Freilinger?
I think we should remember that this is, as Mr. Bork said, in the rural farm district. And the rural farm district is designed for these types of occupations and these types of home businesses, particularly, in the food sector, et cetera. So, yeah, I think this one is more than adequately met, and the proposed structure is very much in line with other structures on Holmes Road and in that part of Scarborough.
Great. Ms. Snow?
Nothing more to add.
Great. And and thank you again for everyone mentioning the RF district, because this is, as you said, Mr. Freilinger, the precise area where a lot of these are meant to take place. Speaking for myself, I grow tons of vegetables in my yard with raised beds and everything else, as do a lot of people around here. So as far as being compatible with existing uses in the neighborhood, I believe that has clearly been met. Mr. Karen, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Letter F, this has been confirmed by the town that this is not located in the shoreland zone. So Mr. Karen, do you agree?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Yes.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. It is not in a shoreline zone. Letter G, the applicant has sufficient right, title, or interest in the site of the proposed use to be able to carry out the proposed use. We'll change up and go back down here again. Ms. Snow?
She has attached the sufficient right of title and interest.
Perfect. Mr. Freilinger?
I agreed.
Ms. Bork?
Agreed.
Mr. Karen?
Agreed.
Mr. Silkman?
Agreed.
Yep, she has provided that information. There's no conflict there. Mr. Karen, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Yes.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I concur and vote aye as well. Letter H, the applicant has the technical and financial ability to meet the standards of this section and comply with any conditions imposed by the Board of Appeals pursuant to subsection 5 of this section. Ms. Snow?
I believe she's also demonstrated the financial ability to meet her responsibilities here and comply with the Board of Appeals.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bork?
Agreed.
Excuse me, I meant to go Mr. Freilinger first, but thank you, Mr. Bork. Mr. Freilinger, my bad.
What I'd say is this is an interesting one because she's already meeting the financial ability here by operating the business as it currently stands. And while probably she should have come before the code enforcement officer or something earlier, it's great that she's here, and I'm glad that she's remedying it at this time. And we should applaud her for doing so. Actually, I think that's a really good thing. So yes, she has clearly the financial and technical ability to meet the standards of the section, and clearly the ability to have a successful business in the RF district. So agreed, and kudos to her.
Thank you. Mr. Karen?
Nothing further to add.
Mr. Silkman?
Same, nothing further.
Great. Yes, the client has stated that they have the financial and technical means for it. And thank you for mentioning that, Mr. Freilinger. It's not always as obvious as we'd like it to be for folks to, come forward and know that this is the exact process that they have to take. So thank you to the applicant for coming forward and doing this. Letter I, all those in favor of letter H being met, Mr. Karen?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Letter I, the proposed use will be compatible with the existing uses in the neighborhood with respect to the generation of noise and hours of operation. Mr. Karen?
As stated, this building will be intended to be used after hours, evenings, early mornings, and weekends. And the generation within, typical of a kitchen, non-commercial. So nothing that would be greater than that of the nearby road or previous businesses. So no concerns. Bless you.
Bless you. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Silkman.
Nothing to add.
All right, Mr. Bork?
This business will have less impact on the neighborhood than other existing businesses and uses. So I don't think that it would have any bearing at all on the neighborhood.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Freilinger?
I'll remind everyone that the property is within a half mile of the Scarborough Rod and Gun Club, which produces substantially greater noise, and I doubt that that sort of noise will be produced by a spice and chilies operation. So I think she's met that.
Thank you. I need to call public safety if we start hearing that. Ms. Snow?
I have nothing further to add.
Great, thank you. And again, stated the equipment operating here just doesn't generate that level of noise. They're not operating any kind of sawmill or heavy machinery or things like that. So all those finding letter I have being met. Mr. Karen,
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. I will entertain a motion at this time to approve appeal number 2732 as currently presented. Mr. Bork,
So moved.
and do I have a second?
I second.
Mr. Karen seconds. Any further discussion on this application? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, Mr. Karen,
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Stone,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Application approved. Thank you for coming before us. I call you Miss Stone. I apologize. I meant Miss Snow.
We knew what you meant.
Um,
Tired tonight.
yeah. I have two babies and they keep me up very late. Next we have.
I would just, before you start, I would just mention that now
Yes.
that the vote's been taken, it is customary for us to receive samples of the product. Little disappointed about that, but,
The building permit, yes.
oh, no, we can't do it on the building permit.
Yeah.
The appearance of impropriety would be there. We can't do that.
Thank you both. All right, next up, we have appeal number 2733. This is a practical difficulty variance appeal. You guys all set? We good?
Sorry, yeah.
No worries. This is appeal number 2733, practical difficulty variance appeal by Paul Letty of Letty Build Design Incorporated on behalf of Bruce Allen Curley and Darlene Jackson Curley Family Trust. This is on 449 Black Point Road, Assessors Map U017, Lot 76. Is there someone here to come on up, come to the podium, state your name and your affiliation for the record, and let's go into why we are here.
Good evening. My name is Paul Letty, Letty Build Design, and we are hired by the applicant to proceed to, either build or renovate this home. So we're looking to obviously build, and that's what we're trying to show.
Great. Well, can you tell us, I guess, before we get into the questions, generally, like current conditions of the property, what the current specifications are of it, number of bedrooms, what you're looking to expand, demolish, put it back in place, footprint size, is it the same mass of structure, more square footage, less square footage, that sort of thing? Give us the 10,000 foot.
Sure, yeah. So the bird's eye view is, I think it's about I have it written down, but I think it's like an 1,100 square foot footprint on the face of the earth. We're not proposing to change that at all. We're using the same footprint on the face of the earth, but we are, I think it's a 3-bedroom, very, very small bedrooms. Everything's really tiny. This house is like a 1920s, the staircase is very narrow, very steep. The bedrooms are really tiny. They can barely fit, a queen size bed in them. And then get around it. It's got a lot of porch. Porch is falling down. It's rotten. I have provided, I presume everybody's got pictures of the general condition of the building. So we're proposing to, of course, offer less porch, more living space, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a large open area to allow this family to use this house as a generational home, mostly I think in the summer, but it's certainly going to be built as a year-round home. So the footprint is the same. We are trying to change the setback issue. We have setbacks. It doesn't meet any setbacks on any side. So we propose to attach the garage, which would then comply with the setback on one side. Move the house 1 foot away from Pinewood Circle, which then we would comply with those 2 setbacks, and not change the existing front and back. Just stay right where they are, which do not conform with modern setbacks. If we did conform with modern setbacks, we'd have a house that was less than 17 feet wide, and it's real hard to live in a house that's less than 17 feet wide.
Sure. Great, thank you for that. Let's go in and discuss all of the criteria. We have criteria 1 through 8. So the need for this variance is due to the unique circumstances of the property and not to the general conditions in the neighborhood.
Uh, That's correct. And you want me to go ahead and read the,
You can go, yeah,
Sure.
because we need to have it sort of
Yeah.
verbally read in because it's all being recorded. just for
sure.
record.
So it's a corner lot. It's a small lot. I think it was very typical for that. All of the lots, I think, in that area are the same. It's a corner lot, though, that actually increases the setback from a 15-foot to a 20-foot. So that adds a little bit more of a challenge to build a house and meet that. We're proposing that we can still meet that, but it is a challenge. Again, just because of the size of the lots that were generated in the 20s and the setbacks that were in place at that time, the house was, status quo. Today, it isn't. We just want to build the same footprint and just make the house better, more livable. And I think that seems to meet that criteria.
Great. Number 2, the granting of a variance will not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. It will not have an unreasonably detrimental effect on either the use or fair market value of abutting properties.
Again, if we are granted this variance, we think that we can do better with the setbacks and the new structure, along with the landscape that right now, the landscape, if I did provide pictures, if you could see it, is way overgrown and actually dangerous. There's trees that are coming down and hitting the house. And so we feel that it would undoubtedly increase the value of the property, and that would have a positive effect on the abutters.
Excellent, thank you. 3, the practical difficulty is not the result of action taken by the applicant or prior owner.
No, we see that it's in the nature of the building codes as they mature through time, and what the existing house is. So it's just kind of a product of time.
You would almost say that the building was constructed and built before really current day ordinances were in place. And
Yes.
lot size.
Yeah, you could.
Dimensions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Number 4, no other feasible alternative is available to the applicant except for a variance.
Well, we did look at first. The first question that that my client, the owner, asked us is, can we renovate this? And a big part of my business is renovating nice old shingle structures. And we went through that exercise. In my opinion, it's past that. I mean, it's unsafe. It's moldy. I provided pictures and tests and things like that. But we just feel that would be just throwing away a lot of money and not getting the results that anybody would really want to raise a family and have a generational home in this community.
Great.
So no, I don't think there's another.
Thank you. Number 5, the granting of a variance will result in bringing the applicant's property more nearly into conformance with surrounding properties.
Yeah, again, allowing to build a new structure. We will be conforming certainly with modern building codes, and we'll be able to meet the setbacks on at least 2 sides. So we're just going to increase the conformity all the way around.
Very good. Number 6, the granting of a variance will not have an unreasonably adverse effect on the natural environment.
The proposed use for this building and lot coverage keeps the ratio the same. So I don't see any adverse effect there. We're cleaning it up. Right now, the lot is, it's got very poor visibility. Again, if we were talking about backing in and out of roads, I don't think that road is that busy, but certain times of day, I'm sure it is, but it's just so overgrown. We think if we can start clear, I think I've offered a landscape plan along with this too, that we can just give this a whole fresh, clean look and make it safer for everybody. We're also showing a hammerhead so that people can turn around. Right now, it's just a straight driveway in. This would allow cars, the occupants to safely, come in and out of their driveway without having to back out into Pine Point Road.
Very good. Thank you. Number 7, the property is not located in whole or in part within a shorelands area, within a shoreland area as defined in 38 MRSA section 435 or flood hazard zone as defined in the Town of Scarborough floodplain management ordinance.
I liked it when Brian answered the other question, so it is not.
Yeah, I can confirm that it's not in shoreland zone or a special flood hazard area.
Great. Thank you. And seemingly simple question, but
Sure.
pretending that someone else is watching this and trying to determine what we're talking about, we a lot of times have to answer these very simple questions,
I understand.
even though we're all on the same page. So I appreciate your patience, Mr. Letty.
Oh, no worries.
Number 8, please demonstrate how the strict application of the dimensional standards of this ordinance to the property for which a variance is sought would both preclude a use of the property that is permitted in the zone which is located and would also result in a significant economic injury to the applicant.
Sure. And I provided a couple of budget scenarios. One was to renovate, and the other one was to build new. And as I mentioned before, if I was to build a new or even try to conform with the setbacks, we'd have a 17-foot wide structure, which isn't real useful. And I would like to add, when you look at those estimates, the renovating it's over $1 million, and the brand new building is under $1 million by 150,000. When you're renovating, there's a lot of unknowns. You start getting into it, and that budget number that I'm trying to shoot for could conceivably grow. And there's just no guarantee. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and that's just the nature of renovation compared to new build. New build, you can pinpoint costs much easier.
Right. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see, any questions from the board for the applicant at this time? Mr. Borg?
Yes, Mr. Letty, I understand the setbacks will be improved on 2 sides.
Yes,
However, there is no reduction in the footprint compared to the existing structure.
that's correct.
I noticed that on the rear of the building, it does have a substantial deck. Could you give us the exact dimensions of that deck?
I could. It's 8 feet out, and it's the same dimension that exists. I'm not increasing any footprint, including the deck. The deck right now is 8 feet, and I believe it's about 22 or 25 feet long.
So it's a large deck.
It's the length of the house, and it goes beyond. Right now, actually, I think I'm reducing the length of that deck because the
Yeah.
deck goes out beyond the building and offers a small ramp.
But the width of it protrudes past the rest of the building.
It does, and if I didn't protrude, the deck is actually the only thing that pulls me outside of the rear setback. That's actually a good point,
far?
David. Well, the dotted line shows it. I think it's about 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah, then you wouldn't have a usable deck.
Yeah, then you have a 4 or 5 foot deck. It's only an 8-foot out deck. It's a
But what if you
long deck.
reduce it by 1 foot? Instead of
Well,
8
then-
feet, 7 feet wide? Is that
Well,
still usable?
you put a lawn chair out on there or a chaise lounge on there, and then you reduce I think 8 foot, just from my professional point of view, an 8-foot deck is pretty much the smallest deck that you would want to. You start putting furniture out there, you put a barbecue grill out there, you start getting kids running around. This family has 3 generations of kids. You start bumping into each other. I think 8 feet's pretty small. Could you reduce it by 7? Certainly. Or reduce it to 7, yes.
Okay. Is there any other way of reducing the footprint practically?
No. I mean, I do this for a living. I don't know how else to reduce besides making the house much smaller and therefore almost not worth, having. I mean, I've only got 3 bedrooms in here, and a bunkhouse. We're creating a bunkhouse above the garage for the kids, but it's really just 3 bedrooms. And I think that for Pine Point, for this family, for this investment, I think 3 bedrooms is not extravagant.
Okay. The only concern was the deck.
Oh, you want to reduce is there a way to
I
reduce
just-
the,
Yeah, I just simply wanted to know.
Yeah,
is
I
that
don't-
practical or-
I don't think so. I chose to keep the deck the same distance out.
Mhm.
And
What about reducing the length
I have reduced the length.
even more, perhaps, another foot?
Again, it becomes not very usable. It becomes, again, this is Maine, summertime, families. I think outside living is a big part of our lifestyle these days.
Mhm.
And just to have a smaller deck, could it be done? Sure. If that was a criteria that we had to, consider, of course, we could make the tiniest deck possible.
Well, the reason I ask these questions is that we're looking for making the property more conforming, the
Mhm.
building more conforming. And you've done that in terms of setbacks
Sure.
on two sides. And I just wanted to know if it was possible to do it as far as lot coverage. And what you're saying is that, yes, it's possible, but it's not practical. Is that what you're?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank
It
you.
doesn't seem to be practical. We've tried to look at this from, again, I'm not increasing the footprint. I'm using the same footprint. I might actually be decreasing it a little bit with the deck itself, but the house and living space by itself is not increasing at all.
Thank you.
And then becoming more conforming with the setbacks.
In your professional opinion, would you say that by reducing the size of that deck even further, that you would potentially be impeding egress off of the deck out of side of the house if there's just, a lot of chaise lounges or chairs or people going around?
I think
there?
it becomes unsafe. If you just put a small deck out there, it either becomes unsafe or unusable, not practical, because if you are going to furnish it, which most of us do, then you're right. It's hard to get around the
Walking
furnishings,
around all
especially
that.
when you get a lot of kids running around and
Sure.
yeah, it becomes unsafe.
Other questions from the board, Mr. Freilinger?
Just, I didn't see this in terms of the percentages, because we saw the improvement in conformance in the sense of the setbacks. What's the current lot coverage percentage versus the R2 restriction?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't in the application material, so and
Yeah.
normally we talk about the percentage coverage, so I'm
I'll
just
bet you Brian could get closer to that than anybody else.
Yeah. So, so that was one thing, because I did see the improvement in conformance, but I shared Mr. Bork's question, I think, as much as anything,
Sure.
which is what is the change or non-delta in conformance for lot coverage? So, yeah.
Yeah. I know that it's very similar to all of our surrounding houses, which I try to provide, photos and I think, you guys all being Scarborough
Yep.
residents, you're very familiar with that area.
Yep.
It's not a bigger house on a lot than anybody else. In fact, it's a small lot, and it's a tiny house.
And this really goes to the next question I had, is on point one. What makes this lot unique, other than the fact that it's a corner lot? Is it a smaller lot than the other lots around, or
It
something?
is
What's
slightly
different
smaller than some of the lot. I think the other lots that it abuts would have been considered at the time they were built as double lots. They're not now because lot sizes have increased. But so there are other lots. It's not unique in that it's this size lot. You will find other lots that small, but it's unique in that it's a substandard by today's standards lot size.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
to answer the question on lot coverage, it's about 30% currently, and he's remaining at 30%.
Okay.
With the
So no
proposal.
change in conformance, but not an improvements in conformance.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
he's not, the only question I have for Mr. Letty, and I just noticed it, on this plan, the deck is shown thusly. And then if you go to your landscaping plan.
Yeah, don't worry
deck-
about the landscaper. He doesn't know what's going on.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just wanted to.
Yeah, I noticed that
Wanted to-
too.
yeah, okay.
And that's Chad Skilling, and he was just taking a crack at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to
In fact,
verify
if you
which one.
look more, he doesn't have the deck proportions right or anything. He's
Okay.
a landscaper.
So this is the drawing that we need to be For as
Yes,
far as
the
exact
architectural
dimensions.
drawing shows the, what I'd be getting a building permit for.
Great, excellent. Thank you for clarifying that. Other questions from board members at this time? Okay. I think what we're going to do now is open the floor for public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this? Have we received any letters, emails, phone calls? Seeing a head shake, doesn't sound like it.
Bob, are you asking me or Doreen? this
I'm
time?
the royal you, as in both of you.
I have received no comments.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, all right, well, thank you, Mr. Letty. We'll call you back if
All right.
we have any further questions.
Sure,
and
thank you.
We'll
Thank you
close
very
thank you. We'll close the public hearing at this point and deliberate amongst the board for the criteria. So we'll dive right into it. And, feel free to express your opinions as we go. Number one, the need for a variance is due to the unique circumstances of the property and not to the general conditions of the neighborhood. I'll start over here with you, Mr. Karen.
I shared this evening that due to the conditions of the corner lot, those setbacks have left what is a approximate 17-foot building envelope, which is not really reasonable, whether it was renovated or new construction. So regardless, variance would be required.
Very good. Mr. Silkman?
Nothing to add to that.
Okay. Mr. Bork?
I think the corner lot issue, covers it pretty well, although I don't really see any clear evidence about, whether or not there are larger lots in this particular neighborhood and the butters, direct butters or across the street, whatever. But some of the photos that we see that have been provided by Mr. Letty show pretty substantial buildings on these lots. So I suspect that some of these lots must be much larger. And clearly are not corner lots. So this does make it a unique lot.
Mr. Freilinger?
I'm torn on this one, and I don't want to punish the appellant for this. The corner lot is a separate issue, and I think that establishes the uniqueness, but we shouldn't ignore the fact that I think this is the 5th Pinewood Circle variance we've looked at in the last 18 months. So there is something non-unique about this area that would argue for the town to examine whether the R2 zoning criteria are appropriate for this area. And it puts an unfair burden on us as a zoning board of appeals and potentially puts us at risk for doing the right thing by the applicant. And I think the applicant is making a perfectly valid thing here, but we're not actually meeting the standards of the state zoning ordinance. So I think we need to at least elevate to the long range planning committee as the sort of stewards of the zoning standards and to the town council that we have a problem in these small lots in the Black Point area. And it's getting kind of ridiculous. So with that, I don't want to punish the appellant. I think and I think the corner lot gives us more than enough window to approve this one, but I think we need to be stewards of the zoning and need to act appropriately.
Agree.
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Go
it
ahead.
just so happens that Mr. Freilinger is in perfect position as a member of the Long Range Planning Committee.
And I say that,
process.
and we have a new planning director coming in, and I think we need to elevate this to more the top of her list, because I think, again, 5 Pinewood Circle variances in 18 months
It's a lot.
it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are other very similar properties in Black Point that we've also approved variances on that it's a lot. So
Fair.
yeah.
That's fair. Ms. Snow?
No further comments.
Great. Not to diverge off this, we can discuss this particular issue in zoning comments at the end. But similarly, Higgins Beach had a similar issue where we see a lot of Higgins Beach all the time. Then the Higgins Beach ordinance came along, but I will hold my comments at the end. That's a separate discussion. But yes, in case of, excuse me, in the case of this application in particular, because it's on a corner lot, there is a unique circumstance here that really isn't the general standard for other homes in this area. So I see no issues with this not being met. Mr. Karen, how do you vote on number 1?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I will vote aye as well. Number two, the granting of a variance will not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. It will not have an unreasonably detrimental effect on either the use or fair market value of abutting properties. I'll start with you, Mr. Karen.
Presented this evening are the drawings, the architectural elevations, floor plans indicating that the proposed design is of a similar nature of those images shown nearby in the neighborhood. So it would not have a detrimental impact to market values, and the materials that clad the exterior are not, they do not vary greatly, so there wouldn't be a change in character either.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silkman.
Given the pictures that were presented of the existing property, I can't imagine, but that all the neighbors are thrilled that this one's going to be renovated, so I would agree.
Very good. Mr. Bork,
Agreed.
Mr. Freilinger,
Completely agree.
Ms. Snow.
I also agree.
Agree. I think, and as we've seen before, and I think it's the general understanding that as you, property values in neighborhoods are only as high as the sort of lowest evaluated home in that space. So bringing homes like this up to a newer standard with appropriate aesthetic and character changes and upgrades can only help abutters and other folks in that neighborhood with even the basic premise of their market value of their home. Those agreeing with number two, Mr. Karen, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I will vote aye as well. Three, the practical difficulty is not the result of action taken by the applicant or prior owner. Mr. Karen?
As stated, based on when this building was constructed, it would appear that this issue stems from changes to the setbacks, not an issue by the previous owner or the current appellant.
Very good. Mr. Silkman?
Nothing further to add on it.
Mr. Bork?
Yeah, this is strictly an issue of property that was built, in fact, the whole neighborhood that was built before Bonner zoning.
Mr. Freilinger?
Agreed with all comments.
Ms. Snow?
I also do.
And I also agree as well. This is certainly a structure that was created before current day zoning ordinances are in place. All those in favor, Mr. Karen?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. No feasible alternative is available to the applicant except a variance. Mr. Karen?
So we've heard this evening that there were different considerations, including renovating the existing structure. But the proposed building is of the same overall building footprint on the face of the earth. So there is an intent to make this into greater conformance with those setbacks. So while there could be potentially located elsewhere on site, a variance would still be required.
Thank you. Mr. Silkman?
I think it's pretty clear that the cost of renovating the facility is exorbitant and doesn't present a feasible alternative. That evidence has been provided to us by the builder with actual cost estimates, which is unusual for a change. So it's nice to see those. So given that, I think the variance is the only option that's available.
Very good. Mr. Bork?
Just one further comment. I want to thank Mr. Leddy for providing a very detailed analysis of the costs of renovating versus the cost of building new. First time that I can recall on this board that a developer has given that kind of detailed information. And that's exactly the standard that we should use going forward.
Mr. Freilinger?
Reiterate entirely, and I'll point out that in prior Pinewood Circle variance requests, no such data has been provided, and I was deeply uncomfortable with that. I am thrilled that Mr. Leddy has provided this, and it gives us all the data that we need to feel comfortable approving this notion. So yes, I think we've met this.
Ms. Snow?
I have nothing further to add.
The only items that I will add is, and again, thank you for showing the cost estimate. It's, again, this is the hardest question to answer, number 4, the feasible alternative. And the more information and evidence and sort of ammunition that you have that you can give to us to help better make this decision only weighs better in your benefit. showing that the cost estimate, and not everything is determined on cost in this instance here, but $150,000+ difference between renovation and home construction isn't is pretty staggering. Also point out that as far as feasible alternatives are concerned, they have demonstrated by showing evidence within the packet that Mr. Silverman was referencing, photographs of the existing conditions of rotten wood, panes, doors, and windows damaged due to that mold. And one of the bigger ones I see, as an electrical engineer, electrical is always a significant concern for me, but just the tree rooting underneath the foundation and trying to renovate the structure in place, you're still left with those inherent, very dangerous really flaws of the natural surrounding of the property. So they're not asking for a much larger house footprint wise. That has been clarified and determined through the conversation. So it shows that they're not trying to seek for more than what they're trying to ask for. That being said, all those in favor of number 4 being met, Mr. Karen?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. Number 5, the granting of a variance will result in bringing the applicant's property more nearly into conformance with surrounding properties. And I'll start down here with Ms. Snow.
Well, he improves setbacks on at least 2 sides. He's maintaining the cottage style of the existing house and the neighborhood. And he's using the same footprint as the existing structure. So I think it's all good.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Freilinger?
I'd agree, and I'd add too that the photos show that the building is clearly not in conformance with building codes and both fire, electrical, et cetera. And I have no doubt that the new structure will be in conformance with those building codes, and therefore will have a safer building for the occupants and for future use. So, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bork?
Agreed.
Mr. Karen?
Agreed.
Mr. Silkman?
Agreed.
And though not explicitly indicated in this, by conforming with modern building codes, you're really putting life safety as a sort of a priority on the structure as well, and not just the life safety of the folks in the building, but in surrounding buildings as well, especially with regard to potential electrical fires and things like that. That being said, all those in favor of number 5 being met, Mr. Karen?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. Number 6, the granting of a variance will not have an unreasonably adverse effect on the natural environment. Go back to you, Ms. Snow.
The applicant proposes new landscaping, which will be more in proportion to the existing building. And it's going to be size and scale to match this small lot.
Very good. Mr. Freilinger.
Agreed, and I think you made a good point earlier, Mr. Chairman, about the roots and the sort of tree invasion of the foundation area, which is both dangerous for the house, but also not great for future use of the property. So I think this is definitely met.
Thank you, Mr. Bork.
Agreed.
Mr. Karen
Agreed.
and Mr. Silkman.
Agreed.
Great. I also agree as well. Again, as you said, Ms. Snow, the drainage is going to be improved. You're really clearing up a lot of those sort of areas around the building where you're not going to be having an adverse effect on the natural environment. You're also not increasing the footprint of the building, as was been stated several times already. All those in favor of number 6 being met, Mr. Karen?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Number 7, the property is not located in whole or in part within a shoreland area or flood hazard zone as defined in the Town of Scarborough Floodplain Management Ordinance. We have had this confirmed by the town and Mr. Longstaff. Mr. Karen, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And lastly, number 8, please demonstrate how the strict application of the dimensional standards of the ordinance, the property for which a variance is sought, would both preclude a use of the property that is permitted in the zone in which it is located, and would also result in a significant economic injury to the applicant. And I'll start with you, Ms. Snow.
Well, if they could not get the variance, they would have a substandard dwelling. That wouldn't be good for the neighborhood or the town. And the replacement costs are higher than doing a new building.
Very good. Renovation costs, you mean?
I mean renovation, yes, I do. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Freilinger.
I think it's thrilling that we have an applicant that's finally demonstrated how the strict application of the dimensional standards would preclude the use of the property and would result in significant economic injury. Clearly, they would have to spend much more and an uncapped much more to renovate in place. And if they were unable to do that and were not to seek a variance, they would clearly be left with a house footprint which would be unusable. So thank you for the demonstration, and this is clearly met.
Thank you. Mr. Bork.
Agreed. Just to add, it's, I believe, a 17-foot footprint, which is certainly not adequate for any kind of a home on this lot.
Mr. Karen.
Agreed, and just pointing back to previous comments regarding the two estimates provided for the renovation versus new construction.
All right. Mr. Silkman.
Nothing further to add.
Excellent. And I'll note as well, characteristically, because we were discussing earlier with this, with regard to the undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detrimental effect on fair market value of our abutting properties. Characteristically, the 17-foot wide structure would not really fit in aesthetically or characteristically with the neighborhood. So there's always, I try to, justify this by the information that we've already discussed in the other questions. That just, it makes the point. That being said, all finding number 8 in favor, Mr. Karen?
Aye.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
And I will vote aye as well. So at this time, I will entertain a motion for appeal number 2733 as currently presented. Mr. Bork,
So moved.
is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Karen seconds. Is there any further discussion on this application? Seeing none, all those in favor, Mr. Karen,
Aye.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
Mr. Freilinger,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye as well. And the motion passes, application passes. Congratulations, you're all set. So I guess that concludes our business for the evening. This leaves us with just our zoning board comments. And one thing I wanted to mention, because we did bring this up earlier, is two things I wanted to mention. But first, continuing on the conversation that you started, Mr. Freilinger, as far as reviews and considerations to the ordinances, the town did go through an extensive effort to create the Higgins Beach zoning ordinance. And though that has been extremely successful, and not saying that it should not be replicated, but the effort to create that is substantial. And I guess I would ask Mr. Longstaff to give us some sort of insight in here to help describe, what would the process be to have that discussion? Is it through the long range committee? Is it through the ordinance committee? Do we have a recommendation that we submit to the town council to have this, sort of similar process reviewed for this area, but potentially for other areas as well?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Higgins Beach character-based code as an example, that, as you mentioned earlier, that arose from just a significant amount of variance appeals coming to the board. It became almost unwieldy. It was every meeting there was, maybe we had 6 or 7 variance applications and 4 of them were Higgins Beach,
Right.
As opposed to the rest of the town. And so it really pointed, as Mr. Freilinger brought up earlier, it pointed to a problem. And I think I was probably the squeaky wheel, the whiner that kept saying the board is overwhelmed with these applications. And, we're faced with some tough decisions to make. And do you do the right thing for the applicant, or do you abide by the rules of law? So the answer was clear. We had to do something. That was a long process and it was an expensive process. And I don't know that we necessarily need to go to that length for the Prouts Neck area, for these areas down there. There are some similar areas in Pine Point that have small lots and so on and so forth, but I think this Pinewood Circle, Garrison Lane, Massacre Lane, those are some real small lots that don't in any way match the conformance requirements, the space and bulk requirements of the R2 zone, and that's what they mostly are. So maybe it's God, I hate to say another zone. We have like 23 zoning districts in Scarborough, but
Right.
maybe we tweak it somehow, some way, and not quite get into the depth that we did with Higgins Beach and coming up with character stuff.
Yeah.
The Prouts Neck Association has some guidelines, and if they want to try to, make those more front and center to people who are rebuilding, maybe that's a good way to go to kind of get the character thing solved, and we could just deal with the space and bulk.
And I'll volunteer on this one, both because I'm on the long range planning committee, and we had a discussion about this on the last long range planning committee. The process for the zoning change is really the long range planning committee proposes something. We discuss it publicly and talk about it, and then bring it to the ordinance committee of the town council. They can say no, and that goes no further, or they say yes, that's a good idea. They tweak it, and they bring it to town council, and it goes through the reading process and all the rest. A couple of things. First off, I'm having lunch with one of the directors of the Prouts Neck Improvement Association later this month.
Cool.
And I can bring that up with him. And I do think there's a lot of overlap for Pine Point as well, which might warrant sort of a traditional beach zoning type of ordinance to consider, and then also make Higgins Beach less bespoke, although they love it bespoke. And bring that more to those areas of the beachfront communities in Scarborough that have those similar older development characteristics, small lots, pre-zoning, in many cases pre-war zoning, or pre-war platting and all the rest.
Sure.
So I'm happy to raise my hand and do that, and I'll talk to Don Hamill, who's our town liaison, and Jean-Marie Caterina, who's our other liaison. I think they will be amenable to this, especially Don, who lives in Pine Point and is aware of the Pine Point issues. So, but I again, when you have 5 Pinewood Circle variances,
Yeah.
it just kind of like becomes,
Well, how many more until we all have them all
exactly.
taken
We've
care
already
of?
completely.
But no,
There's-
right. There's not too many left. I mean, I would say if you're willing to have that discussion with them, if you don't mind carrying the torch on this, Peter.
Yeah,
and
happy
just,
to do that.
And just ask some questions and just kind of get a feel for what that process is and what that would look like. And then maybe next month or a month after or something like that, let's have this discussion again at the zoning board comments and kind
Yeah,
of see where we
exactly.
go.
Maybe not next month, but probably in October, I can kind of give
Yeah.
the people know what the conversations are yielding fruit. So
I think it'd be a good idea. I mean, it's certainly something that we're not in a rush to do, or should be rushed to do. It should be very thoughtful and well thought out if we were to go with any kind of recommendation that we would submit. But let's not lose track of this, but let's check back in October on this if you're willing to do a little research and give us some more info on that.
happy to do so.
That'd be awesome.
And Mr. Chair, I'll just add one thing. When it comes to the Pinewood Circle area and that whole neighborhood in there, uniqueness it's a tough one, but when you stop and look at the tax maps and you look at the property set, they're all over the board. There is no consistency. This property, for example, the one that we just took up, was the smallest of all the abutters
Right.
that touched it.
Right.
But then you go down the street and you might find one smaller that's right next to one that's 5 times as large. So,
Right.
I mean, there's just no consistency.
Well, we had the Scarborough Beach parking lot question. Was that I can't remember. Was that long range planning or was that us?
That was
That was us. Yeah, that was us. And that's in the same area, but you were dealing with property sizes that were 5 and 6 acres that were being considered. So
Right.
yeah, it's not like every lot down there is 6,000 square feet. For sure.
Right. Whereas in Higgins Beach, they were all tiny, but at least
Right.
they were all not identical, but roughly the same.
Yeah, exactly.
So that, maybe that would preclude this from having its own, specially dedicated ordinance in this space. But there may be something we could do with, provisions for dimensional standards and this, for these kind of, for lot sizes under a certain size.
change it. If you really want to get it changed, the way to change it is deny all the appeals. But that's not, I mean, that's not an appropriate way to
Exactly.
move forward. And so at some point, I mean, it's a balance. And I think, Peter, your comment earlier about not penalizing the applicant is the correct approach. And, you know, if this is what we have and this is what we're dealing with, we have to make a judgment call.
Yeah.
And I think we've been making them appropriately so far, and I'm very comfortable with the decisions we've made.
And thank you for saying that, Mr. Silverman. I agree, and you're absolutely right. If we want to make change, theoretically, we should be denying every single one of these that comes through, because it's not a joke as far as that criteria number 4 for the practical difficulty. That is the most stringent and hardest to satisfy. We have come up with our own interpretation as a board together here, our team, you know, our interpretation of evaluating the need and the wants of the applicant. Are they reasonable? Is it, do we really want to penalize them for something where there are some really significant and inherent problems, especially with the well thought out application that we received tonight? With regard, if I can segue this real quick, I know we got emails about this before, but August 25th is the local planning boards of appeals workshop. It's right in South Portland. I really, really encourage everyone, if you are able to, schedule wise, this is paid for by the town, to please attend. It's an excellent refresher, and it really dives into a lot of it. Does discuss all the boards in general, but for zoning especially, it digs into that practical difficulty question and helps give us a better interpretation or a lens for us to view some of these applications through. So please reach out to Brian, Doreen, or myself if you guys want to go to this.
On that subject, I've been to several of these presentations, and they spend a lot of time on undue hardship, but they don't really talk so much about practical difficulty, because every municipality has different rules and regulations about
Sure.
practical difficulty.
Yeah.
But undue hardship is universal in the whole state. So that's something we need to understand, is that we have a lot of things in Scarborough that are unique to Scarborough, and the same thing is true for other towns. So they really hammer the undue hardship, and that's the toughest one to
Sure.
achieve, although we've done accommodations for that too.
Right.
Okay, so it's really, but it is a good workshop to go to nevertheless.
Yep.
And at the same time, I think maybe once a year to have our town attorney come in and talk to us about things that are unique to Scarborough. Okay, not to try to teach the basics that's covered by the MMA, but rather the unique things to Scarborough.
Well, I know we spoke with our town attorney, I think, 7 months ago, 7 or 8 months ago. So maybe come later this fall or something like that, maybe let's take this as an opportunity for all of us to maybe think about a few things that we would like to have some instruction or discussion with from the town attorney. And let's talk about it next month, and let's talk about the month after that. And once we maybe have a list of a few items together, we can give that to Brian to give to our town attorney, and we could set up a nice little workshop and meeting with them.
One final comment,
Yes.
Mr. Silverman made the right thing, which is when we're frustrated with something, the way that we can demonstrate that something is consistently not being met or the standards not being met is we can start denying things out of hand. I think we're getting close to that with this demonstration of practical difficulty. The variance we had tonight was great because they brought facts to the table. They brought pictures, they brought local
Cost
pictures,
estimate.
they brought cost estimates of different scenarios, not just theirs, and it will be more than. If we look at some of the other variances we've seen for practical difficulty, it's basically an assertion of it's really hard, therefore this is good. And I don't think that meets the standard we should be living up to.
I guess on that, Mr. Longstaff, is there a way, and I know you have direct most of the time anyways, coordination, collaboration, and communication with the applicants. Is there a way for you to save this application that we have, or specifically the cost estimate? And can we have it posted on the website, or maybe it's just a conversation that you have with them and say, hey, you're going forward with the practical difficulty. This is something that the board really likes to see. It's not required, but this will really help you if you can provide this, and just give them a copy of that cost estimate for this previous application, because it's public information now, so it can be, published anywhere.
Well, yeah, it is public information. I would probably
Blank out the name.
sanitize it a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Blackline or
Um,
whatever.
Of course.
But-
Very generic.
But I mean, I just want to go on record again. I think I've told you this before. I do have extensive conversations with the applicants.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
do
yeah,
give
we're not
them
denying
verbally
that.
a lot of guidance.
Yeah.
And I talk about the types of information that the board needs to see in order to demonstrate these very difficult things to demonstrate. What they do with my guidance is not under my control. And I do not have the time to babysit applicants
Sure. Mm.
all day long. We have a very busy town.
Sure.
So I do my very best to give them verbal guidance. To your point, though, I think if I ever have a moment, it might be good to get a sheet, a guidance sheet, and give them some examples and maybe include that in that and hand that with them or send that to them with the application. That wouldn't be an unwieldy thing for me to do, and certainly could help the quality of the applications going.
And invite them to look at previous zoning board meetings on YouTube where a certain board member is getting.
Except for last month.
Exactly correct.
That one.
Which is not on YouTube.
Exactly, which is not.
That was X-rated, no.
But there's at least one board member who's getting testy about this. So yeah, that would be.
And
Andy.
I mean, and to Brian's credit, and
Yeah.
the department does have
Yeah.
a lot of communication. And again, you can lead the horse to water, but whether they drink or not is up to them.
Exactly.
And that's, again, that's why when they come forward with that application that's directly in front of us, we have to judge them on the merits of what this piece of paper states in front of us. And if we find that it doesn't have enough information that satisfies the factual information, the application, our gut check of what they're telling us, what we're hearing, then we need to send it back, either deny it or we table it for additional information. And we say, table it, you need to come back with a cost estimate before we can, with good conscience.
That should
Approve or
probably be the
disapprove
first
this. consideration,
consideration is we're saying we're going to table this because you're not providing us
Yeah,
with
and you
enough
have-
information to make a decision. We're going to reschedule you for the next meeting.
Right.
You have to come prepared.
And the tricky side of that, the double-edged sword of that is if we start tabling all these applications and appeals, those are going to start leading to, we are volunteers and this is what we are here, but those meetings will start to become significantly longer, not just for us, but also for the appellants. And maybe that's the catalyst for them to say
Part of
that
the incentive.
they don't want just to sit there in complete silence the entire time, waiting until 10 o'clock for them to have their chance to speak.
Something to think about, though, going back to to Mr. Siltman's suggestion, it's certainly not out of the realm of reality to think that you could start denying more appeals if you don't see the information that you need. They can come back in a year's time. They may want to do this year, but if their application isn't up to par and you're not seeing what you want, deny, and they can come back with, you could even deny it without prejudice and say, if you want to come back with something
Mhm.
sooner, we might consider it. It doesn't say you can't consider it. It says you may not consider it.
Right. I think it's like it can't be the exact application
Can't be
that
the
they
exact
submit.
applicant. So
It has to
if
be
they came
different.
back with more information, maybe that's enough to say it's not exactly the same. I don't know.
Right. Right.
That's your, I'm
That'd be a
not gonna,
determination.
I don't want to direct you, but I mean, I think that that's a great suggestion. They're not necessarily dead in the water if they come back in a year's time or whatever with more information.
Right.
And just to be clear, I want to, part of what my elevation of this is the quality of tonight's application with the data that they provided was such a stark contrast to some of the other practical difficulty variances we've seen that just kind of set it in stone for me. It's like, yeah, you can do this. It's possible.
But it's not a requirement on our website that they have to provide a cost estimate. So
No,
that's
but they do need to demonstrate. And I think the word demonstrate is quite clear in the application. And we haven't seen demonstration to date. We've seen
Yeah.
assertions.
we've seen assertions, and sometimes that is enough, but a lot of times it is not enough.
Yeah.
And that's again our determination for it. And when we see those things that are apparent, it's our job to see it and just state it on the record in public for everyone to see and for the board to see as well. Because during each of our reviews of these packets, individually, one of us may see something that others may not see, just based on our experience, our own personal, from being on the board and work experience as well. So, and that's why the board is made up of all volunteers, made up of diverse backgrounds. Everybody has something to sort of bring to the table here.
What is interesting is, I mean, in maybe just Scarborough, people are very nice, neighbors get along, but there's very little opposition to any of the ones that I've been on. I'm sure you've had contentious ones in the past, but by and large, when there's no opposition and we, maybe stretch a little bit the definition or give the applicant the benefit of the doubt or don't require the full amount of cost estimates, there's no harm done.
No.
I mean, ultimately,
Yes.
the project gets built, everybody's comfortable, it's a good outcome for everybody concerned. And the alternative, of course, is if we were to deny one because we didn't think that they had made the demonstration, they always have the right of appeal. And then, now we've got to defend the denial of it based on a record and the standards that we've used in the past. And so it could put us in a very awkward position if we're ever in that situation where we have denied one and we've treated it differently than the standards that we've used in the past.
And
so we do have, it's a fine line. I mean, thus far, and I'm a new guy here, right? I haven't been on anywhere near as long as you folks have, but I've been quite impressed by the general similarity with which we all view these applications coming forward, and the approach that's being taken. I think is very well considered, and ultimately the decisions I think have been pretty good.
I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Silkman.
May I
And
add something?
yes,
That,
go ahead.
I think denial can lead to some bad outcomes, potentially, for the applicant as well as for the board. Because if we deny, it can be appealed, and then we have a problem trying to defend, what we did. I would feel a lot more comfortable in a situation where it's clear to everybody on the board the applicant is not prepared to table it.
Yeah.
And to make that decision early on during the appeal, rather than to go through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right, just when we see that there's not enough information, a motion to table.
Agreed.
Okay,
And then-
for whatever reason, okay? And then that gives the applicant the opportunity to come back prepared, if they so choose.
I agree with David. That, and to your point, when we table something or defer it, the next meeting is longer, but we've just shortened this meeting
Yeah.
by being proactive up front.
Exactly.
100%. And I'm not, and I will, I mean, I've been in meetings here till like 1 a.m. was the latest I've ever been here
That
for
was
one.
bad one.
And so that is, it's never an objective to have shorter meetings by any means. I only say that out of respect for all of our personal time, because again, we are all volunteers, and Doreen and Brian here are late on a weeknight. That they are also here during the day.
1 a.m. and we're going to impeach the chair.
I'll gladly offer this up to anybody who wants it. So thank you. Yes, don't threaten me. I will throw this at you if it means getting. But I really appreciate the thoughts tonight. So let's keep this conversation going. We're going to follow up with you, Peter, in October with regard to what can we do to take a look at these zones a little bit better, and let's talk a little bit more over the next month or so about maybe it's a guidance sheet that we can all maybe work on together separately or something like that we can help Brian out as far as give them some ammunition to make their job a little bit easier, to sort of give more information to the applicants coming forward. But to your point, Mr. Bork or Mr. Freilinger, as you said it, identifying it early, if this application really doesn't have it, can be done during the question and answer period at the very beginning of each, after they've had a chance to sort of state their, say their spiel, and all of that. We have that opportunity to say, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And already you can say, Mr. Chair, like, I don't have enough information from what they've given me here to really continue with half of these questions on the criteria. the discussion happens. If people are in agreement, the motion is made to table it. And that's given direction of, hey, Mr. Applicant or Mrs. Applicant, you need to bring back information regarding to, say, this cost estimate of a clear definition between renovation and new, or whatever that criteria that we need to have more clarified.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you giving this discussion a chance to play out on the record so that we can use this in the future as well, if we have any disputes or anything. And I would motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yes. I'll take yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Just one
Longstaff.
thing, I just wanted to announce too, it was mentioned earlier, our new planning director should be on board on the 22nd of this month. Her name is
Nice.
Autumn Spear.
Awesome.
She comes from Austin, Texas. We're really excited to fill that spot.
Awesome. Is she going to do the rounds and like spend 6 months with us on the board as just an audience member in the back as sort of a, a grace period? Welcome to Scarborough.
I certainly can't speak for her. I'll mention it.
Give her an invite.
It's funny. Looking forward to meeting her. All right, there I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Karen, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that is unanimous. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Don't forget the 25th. Let Doreen and Brian know.